Introduction. Sources of law refer to the origin from which the law derives its authority and principles. They can be classified into two sources, primary sources and secondary sources. Primary sources include the Constitution, which is one of the highest laws, outlining the structure of government, the distribution of powers and fundamental rights that have been enacted by the legislature, such as regulations, judicial precedents that allow court decisions to establish legal principles, especially in common law systems and administrative law. They consist of regulations and decisions made by administrative agencies. Although secondary sources are not legally binding, they provide interpretations and guidance on primary sources. These include legal treatises, legal commentaries, journals and customary law that represent long-standing practices accepted as binding in communities. Furthermore, international law, such as treaties and conventions, has greatly influenced domestic legal systems.
Hello Sammy, how are you? Nice to meet you. Do you remember what the main sources of Malaysian law are?
Hello Leslie, I'm fine. Nice to meet you too. Let's see. The federal constitution is the big one, right? It's like the backbone of all our laws.
Exactly. It's the highest law, and everything else has to align with it. But what else?
Then we have legislation, which covers all the written laws like acts passed by Parliament. And there's also English common law from our colonial days.
You're on a roll. Don't forget customary law, which applies to certain communities, and Islamic law, which is specific to Muslims.
Got it. So, it's a mix of the old, the new, and the cultural.
Exactly. A diverse system for a diverse country. Sammy, do you know what is the supreme law of Malaysia?
Of course Leslie. This is the federal constitution is the supreme law of Malaysia.
Do you know what is the role of common law in Malaysia's legal system?
Yes I know. This is a common law principles, particularly from English law, are applied in areas like contract, tort, and property law, especially where there is no specific legislation.
How does Islamic law, Sharia law, apply in Malaysia?
Sharia law applies to Muslims in matters of family law, inheritance, and personal status. Each state has its own Sharia court system to administer Islamic law.
What is the significance of customary law in Malaysia?
Customary law, particularly adat law, plays a significant role in regulating land matters, inheritance, and other aspects of life for indigenous communities.
Can you explain the concept of subsidiary legislation?
Subsidiary legislation refers to regulations, rules, and bylaws made by government agencies or authorities under the authority of primary legislation. These rules provide more detailed guidelines for implementing the primary law.
Where do Malaysian laws come from, Sammy?
Let's explore and find out. This is the federal constitution, the highest law in Malaysia. Here, laws are created by Parliament and the states. Unwritten laws like common law come from court decisions. Customs are part of the law too, but only if they don't clash with the constitution.
Now I understand Malaysian law.
It's a mix of written and unwritten rules.
Sammy, can you name 2 examples of written law in Malaysia?
Yes can. Examples of written law in Malaysia are the Penal Code and the Companies Act.
What is the role of judicial precedents in Malaysia's legal system?
Judicial precedents serve as unwritten laws where court decisions, especially from higher courts, become binding on similar cases in the future under the doctrine of stare decisis.
What role does the state constitution play in Malaysia?
The state constitution governs state-level administration and legislative matters specific to each Malaysian state.
How does English common law influence the Malaysian legal system?
English common law, inherited from Malaysia's colonial past, applies to areas not explicitly covered by written laws, provided it suits local circumstances.
How does international law affect Malaysian law?
International treaties and conventions ratified by Malaysia can influence its laws, but they must be incorporated into local statutes to have legal effect.
What is the difference between written and unwritten laws?
Written laws are formally documented in the federal constitution, state constitutions, and statutes, while unwritten laws consist of judicial precedents, customary laws, and Islamic law.
What is a dat perpeti?
A dat perpeti is a matrilineal customary law system practiced mainly in Negeri Sembilan and parts of Malacca, governing inheritance and family matters.
Conclusion. In a nutshell, we discover by studying Malaysian law that the nation's legal system is based on both official and unofficial sources. All other legislation are based on the federal constitution, which establishes the guidelines. As the written foundation of the legal system, laws are also made by state assemblies and parliament. Common law and customs are examples of unwritten laws that provide depth by reflecting the nation's conventions and prior court rulings. These components work together to give Malaysia's legal system balance and evolution.